This week on the Communicators, a discussion about the future of newspapers in the digital age. Our guest is Saridakis with the Gannett Company.
Our guest this week on the Communicators, Saridakis with the Gannett Company Incorporated, serves as their Chief Digital Officer. An impressive title. What exactly does it mean?
So basically I'm in charge of Gannett's strategy as it transforms itself from a newspaper broadcast company into a digital powerhouse. So my role there specifically is to make sure that we take all of our assets, be it news or information or databases, and make it accessible to our consumers of that content in a digital medium, whether it's websites or mobile applications.
Well, because Gannett is pretty much synonymous with USA Today and newspapers being a topic I think you probably deal a lot with. As we talk, this comes as information comes out when it comes to like newspaper readership, that I think it's down 4% this year from this time last year. And, you know, along with those things, advertising and everything else is down. From your perspective and where you sit in your job, what does that mean and what challenges does that mean for you?
Well, I think it's a big opportunity, actually. Most of those readers are consuming a lot more information online, or they're finding it online. So the traditional use of a newspaper being delivered at home is changing, but the opportunity for Gannett and for me at Gannett is to take advantage of that migration from a traditional platform like newspapers onto the digital medium. And so what's exciting about that is they're not losing readers of their information, they're just changing their behaviors.
And I should point out that two papers kind of stuck out from those trends, your paper and Wall Street Journal.
Right.
Does that mean Gannett sees the end of a traditional print newspaper?
Well, I wouldn't think it's the end of a traditional newspaper, print newspaper, but I do think what we'll do is tie a lot of the content that you see in a newspaper online, and vice versa. And what we do really well at Gannett and USA Today and across all of our properties is we study consumer behavior, and we look at how people are consuming information. So the paper won't go away necessarily. It'll be complementary to another person's experience. And when you look at it from an advertiser perspective, they want to reach that consumer in any medium. So at times, it's much more advantageous for that advertiser to find a user in a digital medium. It's much more interactive. Their message could be a lot more interactive. When they're in lean back mode reading a newspaper, they still want to reach that consumer, albeit it may be a slower way of achieving that goal. But it's still an important medium, and it still is an impressive medium from local news, local information, as well as with USA Today, the largest national newspaper. So it's an important way for us to take our audience and push them to an online medium, but not in a deliberate way where we're trying to sunlight the newspaper.
Is the audience ready for that transition?
I think they are. I think they're starting to see. Gannett has been pretty progressive in developing its websites over the past 10 years. We've spent a lot of time looking at how people are consuming information, taking advantage of as much technology as possible to make that environment much more interactive. And we're doing that as well with mobile. So I think we're probably ahead of the curve from where many other companies are. And what's exciting about that is the consumers are. I mean, they're spending a lot more time today than they were yesterday on a computer or in front of a device that pushes information to them.
When you talk about the digital medium, do you foresee it as someone looking at an internet screen at their desktop, or do you see, or does it go beyond that?
It goes way beyond that. In fact, a digital medium is to some extent, right now, as far as we can see, it's a mobile medium. It's me sitting outside waiting and hopping on my laptop. Even if I can get 10 or 15 minutes of business in, it could be a computer, it could be a PDA. But for all intents and purposes, it's zeros and ones that are forming into information that people find valuable. And that may be on a laptop, it may be on a PDA, it may be even a touchscreen at a kiosk at a hotel. And that's what I'm focused on.
So as your job, then tell us a little bit about what you do to, first of all, on the content side. Does it differ as far as moving content to a screen, or does it, whether it be a screen on a desktop or a screen on a mobile screen, what challenges does that mean as you move content across? Because there's different experiences involved.
Absolutely, and that's a great point. So when we look at developing content for print, you have to think it's within a day. So by the time it gets printed out, it may be somewhat stale in its newness. Having said that, you could add a lot more color in your print version than you can with online. The opposite of that online is that we could add community feedback really quickly. In fact, all of our websites are enabled with a technology that lets people respond to information. It also provides us an opportunity to dig deeper into databases that we've been developing for over 100 years that has a lot more information about cities and storylines beyond just the story at hand. So what we're doing and what's exciting about it is I think the newspaper information that we produce typically for the newspaper, it's put into a digital environment, and it gives someone a lot more access to deeper databases, deeper pieces of information, and they can make their own judgment or decisions about the story or the information they're receiving. And I think we're experts at that. At the same time, what is unique and different about a company like Gannett versus other pure play internet companies is, we are journalists. We stand by the First Amendment, and we appreciate and respect the right of a person to seek out and get as much information and make it as accurate as possible. Applying that against an online audience in a world where people are spending a lot of time talking about user-generated content, it's different. So when you look at the consumers of our information, those are people looking for real information, whether it's local or national, and applying it in a way in which we could offer deeper databases. I think that's a value added, and that's where we see a lot of our traffic going to our websites and spending, not seconds but minutes.
Do you mean, as far as deeper databases is concerned, everything aside from blogs and aside from, say, YouTube-type generated content?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And and even beyond that, Pedro, I think actually there's a lot more information that we have on local municipalities. In fact, I was at Wilmington yesterday meeting with the News Journal, and it's impressive to see that local news operations that produce a great newspaper have deep databases about territories and districts and information within those districts, as local as the fire department and how far it is from the homes that people live in. That is a good supplement to stories they may write about that. You don't find that just anywhere on the web, and it's hyper local, and it's as interesting as where I live and where someone else may find information. That's valuable. So that's a database that. It's one of many. We collect that information, we use it to help write our stories, but we also now online use it to offer that consumer that information in a more directed, searchable way.
So do you see like stories of the future, seeing if it's on a device, not say if it's a story about the Board of Supervisors, providing a link to the Board of Supervisors, providing a link to someone who maybe opposes the Board of Supervisors. Exactly. Is that what you mean?
That's exactly it. It's being able to write the story and let others either connect the dots, form their own opinion, and even offer that opinion back to that community who's reading that.
There's some statistics that came out from the beginning of this year for the first quarter from the Nielsen Online custom analysis, and they showed a little bit about newspaper websites and the kind of interactivity that people go to. They said for the first quarter there was an average of like 66.4 million visitors. There's 3.1 billion page views per month, and the average page view per person was like 47 pages. Could you translate those numbers and tell me what you see in those numbers and how that affects how you do your business?
Sure. What's interesting about the content that Gannett produces and the sites that we have is we have an audience that's incredibly loyal. If they are not subscribing to the newspaper, they're going online. And we see that. They're going online to our sites and they're consuming that information. Not only that, what those numbers are saying is that people are spending a lot more time finding that information and going back more consistently. So it's the same behavior and habit that a person would have had they subscribed to that newspaper and had it delivered, only online they'll wake up, they check out the newspaper, they look at the information. During the day they do the same thing. It's a behavior because they're looking for that updated story. And what's nice about the web is you could break news, local news, on the web, and now the local communities, at least from Gannett's standpoint, they're going there to see what's new, what has happened, has there been an addition to the story. So those numbers are incredibly impressive. What it's also saying is that people are looking at that local resource as an independent authority to give them the information around their area. And it's working out really well.
So as far as local newsrooms are concerned, are they really going to be the X factor? Let's say that major newspapers like USA Today provide the same type of stories or with other papers. What does the local newspaper have to do right now? And how are you advising, especially those in Gannett's stable?
Well, I think the local newspapers, and we've been transforming that whole part with our information center. So we've built out our local newspapers so that they can share information among each other, but more importantly, be able to create a 24/7 desk where they're looking for stories. The other fascinating thing is we're enabling a lot of the citizens in these communities to offer up information or stories, videos, pictures, so that they could help give another perspective to the story. that's important, and that's what we're hearing from those local audiences. As it relates to national stories, I mean, what's interesting about how a local story becomes a national issue, it's just a matter of how viral it becomes, what people are interested in, and how well written that story is. And on the web, you could test all that data. You could look at it and see, is a story getting a lot of pickup? And should someone nationally pick up that story and maybe do another angle of it? What we're doing technologically with the local newspapers is we're deploying a lot of technology to let them not only be able to distribute their stories, so create the content, but distribute it among the newspapers. Because the story in Wilmington may be as relevant in Phoenix, or maybe just as interesting. And like our mom sites that we've developed, a mom is a mom no matter where you are. There are information that's built within the Cincy mom sites that we've had that it's relevant to anyone.
And what do you mean by mom sites?
Mom sites that are reaching a demographic within a local community. Mothers who have concerns about health care or schooling or just information around how to take care of a newborn to how to prepare your son or daughter for college. That information, it's relevant to anyone. It may come out of a local community, but we take this local content, extract it, and distribute it nationally. So what we've done is we have a bottom-up approach to content creation and distribution. We deploy a lot of technology to do that, and part of my role is to make sure we have the right technology so that we can do it much faster and in a unified platform.
And you mean more than just high-speed broadband lines?
Absolutely.
Things like that.
It's an infrastructure that not only lets us create the content and distribute it, but on the other side, monetize it so that we can continue to be profitable and grow business much faster than many of our competitors.
So when you look at a structure, how do you keep up with technology, not just for now, but what you're going to need 5 years from now?
So my background prior to joining Gannett was I was the CEO of Point Roll, and I was one of the early founders of DoubleClick's technology business in the mid-90s. I've spent most of my time developing the technology that's being used today, whether it's ad-serving technology or video-based serving technology or rich media interactive tools. So we also have a whole other side of Gannett that spends most of its time looking and working with companies like Adobe or Microsoft or Google or anyone to see what else is out there. But the main focus of all of our businesses, whether it's content creation or technology development, is around consumer behavior and interest levels. And if we could define that, we could solve the problem for the publisher and the advertiser.
And defining that, how do you determine how a consumer behaves online, especially when they want news?
It's true, and from a news standpoint, what we do know is they want it to be as updated as possible. They want it to be as deep as possible, and they also want it to be relative to what they're looking at that point in time. So it's not to say that people only go online to read news, and that shouldn't be the case for any news-based company. But the reality is, if someone's going to go to your local site, you have to be prepared to offer them the information that they're looking for, not only the story, but the corresponding information. So that's an interesting behavior, because normally people would just read the paper, read the story, and then just turn the page. On the web, they're reading the story, and then they may actually go off on a tangent and say, well, let me do more research around this, and let me go deeper, whether it's local or national. So we understand that part. But even from the interactive elements of the web, being able to have a consumer come back and say, well, I do want to join this group and join this forum and this conversation, or I want to reach out to the local utility company and tell them how upset I am about rate increases, and offering that outlet where they probably wouldn't have done it before, or they wouldn't have scribed a letter and put a stamp on an envelope. This is an easy way of doing it. So there's certain mechanics around what makes it easier for a user online to consume our information, but also send it to a friend or invite others to share in that thought process.
How does push technology enter in when information is automatically sent to you?
Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of that where you see email newsletters, people subscribe to it and information is pushed to them, or text alerts on their mobile devices. And we actually have been taking advantage of some of that as well. People can set up alerts. If it is an important issue locally or nationally, or sports scores or weather, or you name it. And we see a lot of that push technology relevant to sports and weather and travel. And so we've been successful in deploying that. I just think the user is going to filter out what's important and be able to define that, and they should. And so what we realize is that someone's not going to read hundreds of emails a day and have half of them come from one source. There's a diversity element around content being distributed to a user. So, but I do think that if there's something important that's relative to a user, and this is where the local aspect comes in, what's unique about it is communities are local, and they want to know what's happening within their own world. And once we put that together where we can alert a person down to their street level, that would be intriguing and compelling for a user to sign up and find out about it. So I do think there's an element where push will be helpful, But if it's too much, then in the email world, it's called spam. And on the online world, what's nice about it is it's up to a person to seek out what they want. And understanding that people go on the website and they have to go to a place, and that action of going to a place to find information is much more intriguing to us than just hit them with a website that looks like a newspaper.
The other side of all you do is advertising. And when you make a transition from a print world to a digital world, what has to be considered when it comes to advertising dollars?
Well, it's a really good point, and that's one area where Gannett has done a good job on the local level of advertising and within USA Today from a national perspective. But one of the initiatives that I have today going on at Gannett, we call it One Gannett, where we're building out a sales and a relationship team that focuses on national advertisers looking to brand their message or their products nationally, but target and activate locally. And it's a hard thing to do, but we also have to recognize that an advertiser may not be interested in where a person is, but more interested in who the person is. And what's important about that is sometimes newspaper companies fall into the trap of building out content only about the local community, but not realizing that that local community is made up of doctors and lawyers and moms and teachers and whoever. And if you think of that, advertisers want to reach those demographics and those professions or those behaviors, not just because they're locally, but because that's what they do. So what we've done and what we're continuing to do at Gannett is starting to segment our audience so it's much more compelling for those national advertisers who are looking to reach people in local communities because they realize the power of local communities in spreading the word and word-of-mouth marketing. So we're building that out today. We've been successful with the Moms Project, where we have 80 sites being developed for the moms community. But also, more importantly, is looking at other segments where, from an advertiser perspective, they can't really find these individuals. But we have them in our audiences in our local communities.
So if I'm an advertiser and I want to sell soap or a service, and I come to you and say, I'd like to do this, how do you go about making sure that my service or soap hits those various communities, and what kind of methods do you employ?
So, the first part from a digital standpoint, and if we're just looking at the digital realm, that advertiser would want to probably advertise a brand nationally, which they could do on USA Today or any of our websites if they wanted to just market a brand.
How many websites total, by the way?
We have over 135 websites between the newspapers and the broadcast stations. And then probably a few hundred more just within the non-daily, so Military Times and healthcare, Nurse and Spectrum. So there's a lot of diverse content. But let's just say that advertiser wants to reach a national audience. We could target them through USA Today and through all of our newspapers and broadcast stations. More importantly, though, if they say, well, we also have a unique offer for folks in the Southwest, as we do for people up in Westchester, New York. And we want to kind of change and segment that offer. Can you offer me those audiences? And also, can you offer me an audience that is male skewed? And if it is male skewed in the Southwest, we want to target this message. So we can keep on filtering down and do this today and offer that advertiser the ability not only to nationally market that brand, but to reach that specific target in those markets. And when you complement that with the fact that that advertiser is probably buying in those newspapers as well, what we're doing is now surrounding those users with this message from an advertiser, national, local, print, digital, or on TV with broadcast or on the mobile device. So if you look at your own behavior, or anyone's behavior today, you could wake up and read in the paper, you could watch television, you could be on your mobile device, and you could be in front of a computer. In fact, with Gannett, we own a company called Captivate, where you could also read information while you walk into an elevator, and it's distributed, and also be targeted with a message as well within that geographic area. So for large advertisers, it's a great way of releasing brands, new products, and distributing that message to an audience.
If you get mail at home, you could throw it away. If you have a TiVo, you can fast forward through the commercials. On the digital front, how do you attract as far as getting a person to actually consider this product or service?
Well, what's interesting about news and information is when people sign up, and you're right, and even in email, they could delete those emails that come in. When people subscribe to an email about news and about local news and information, they're doing it on a proactive choice. They're saying, I want this information to be sent to me every morning, and I want any news alert to be updated to me. That's a huge benefit online. To us, that means that they not only want our content, but they're willing to take whatever else comes with it, whether it's an advertising message or not. Same thing with a mobile device. When we have an investment in a company called 4Info, which is the leader in SMS text messaging. So you could type in weather or sports scores, and you're going to get that information back, but along that will be an advertisement as well. So to some extent, I think, and I believe that if you're offering a consumer something of value, in return, they won't mind having a message targeted to them. And if they don't want the message targeted to them, then they're probably looking for a subscription to something, and they want to be devoid of those advertisements. On the web, it's tougher to get around that model.
Turn it around a bit. If I'm an advertiser, how do you, and I've done print or traditional media all this time, what kind of sales, excuse the term, pitch do you make to an advertiser to say, consider this new way of doing business?
Well, you know, the first thing we do is just recognize that the consumer they're probably trying to reach is spending a lot more time online today than in any other medium, and at the expense of any other medium. And just that proof, and most advertisers, most brand managers know that, and they see that. So it's a given fact that this medium has taken off and has consumed people. The second fact is that now that we've established that people are spending more time online or in front of a digital device, you have to understand what kind of behavior that consumers is doing in that device. And just the level of interactivity to show that, you know, not only can you deliver an advertisement to a user online, but you could have them engage in your brand at the same time is pretty powerful. It's almost the equivalent of someone watching a television commercial and touching the screen and saying, yep, I'm going to go to the store and buy it right now. You could do that online. So we've already established the fact that people are spending more time online. We've established the fact that when they're online, they're a lot more interactive. And thirdly, e-commerce has grown and continuing to grow. Look at Amazon, you look at any type of e-commerce play today, people are much more comfortable buying online. That behavior shows that people are comfortable in that medium. And if they're comfortable in that medium, we can market it there. And it's not just that there's a million. There's hundreds of millions of these folks online 24/7 every single day. So I'd probably say it's a mass medium enough to get the attention of many brand advertisers and brand managers.
Are advertisers generally getting into it, or do they need some convincing?
No, I think most of what you see out there, I think most advertisers, it's still a small piece of the budget. 3 or 4% of someone's budget today is being focused on advertising. Advertising being broken out into display advertising versus search. But that's still so small. It'll continue to grow. And 3 or 4% of a budget today is creating enormous companies and enormous value. It's just still that a lot of advertisers and a lot of traditional media companies can still prove there's value in the print and the broadcast world, and there is when you surround the user. And I don't think the web is going to rid anyone of newspapers or broadcast. It's just another way of reaching a user. And when you look at the behavior of a user on the web, it's different than how they watch TV and how they consume information in a newspaper. And to a marketer, sometimes it's better to market in each one of those mediums, individually or collectively.
How do, when you think of a marketing strategy and you talk about your traditional websites, what about social networking sites and things along like your Facebook? Is there a strategy for that as well?
Yeah, so what we've done is, at least within the Gannett world, and you see this a lot now in news organizations, it's really interesting to see what does the local person think about this story? What bothers them? What's interesting to them from a brand perspective? So being able to build a community within a local community is unique. Facebook, as it relates to friends, you know, we always say, and we have slides where through our analyst presentation we went through this medium is becoming a lot more user-generated, interactive, and social. And what's nice about the social aspect for us is we are an outlet for people to talk about things. And so it's helping us, but it's also helping younger folks get online and discuss issues. You know, the upcoming political campaign, I think, is a great example of individuals being able to express their opinion about what the candidates are saying in their own groups, not just going to a website and saying, well, this is what I think of Hillary or what I think of McCain or Obama. It's, hey, have you seen this new thing that's occurring right now? I'm going to this meetup, or I'm going to attend this social. Do you want to come with me? And that's outside of the news and media world. So I think the web is truly being used as a social, a coffee club, for lack of a better term, among any groups, interest groups, but also they could tap into news and information sources and socialize there as well and bring that into their own fold. So I think it's a great way of people leveraging this medium, not just for content and advertising, but to communicate and socialize with their friends.
What kind of strategy do you envision then as other media companies get into the same type of not only online presence but online advertising, and you'll start competing with each other digitally rather than, you know, on turf?
True, and I think that's probably the perception that most people have. And I always look at how Gannett has formed and its core assets. And its core assets is content development, news and information, whether it's local or national. How we distribute that through broadcast, through newspapers, on elevators, or in the digital medium doesn't really make that much of a difference. And I think we're not going to build the next Facebook. Our goal isn't just to build technology and applications and then try and build an audience around it. We build our audience based on information that we produce. And in the end, when you produce good information and if it's relevant to someone, you're going to win. And I really believe that, and I believe we continue to win in each one of our areas we're in, whether it's print or broadcast in USA Today. So we're going to keep on focusing on that, content creation. Distribution will continue to change and evolve. On the web, it just so happens that it evolves almost every day. There's something new that's coming out. We just have to be ahead of the curve when new technology comes out, so that we can not only produce the content for the users, but be able to monetize it and make a profitable business doing it. So we'll probably compete in what's the next coolest little widget or gadget that appears on a website, but the reality is if the content isn't there, then the user's not going to come, no matter how nice and interactive that site is.
Because we're in Washington, D.C., are there policy issues, especially concerning your job, that you keep an eye on?
I think the biggest one is privacy. Privacy around the consumer. I think it'll always remain an issue, being able to respect the rights and the users of an individual online as you would in any other medium. So that's probably something we always keep a focus on. One, because we produce content, and two, because we sell advertising against that audience. That's probably the most important part for us.
And so another policy issue is, I know, because it concerns a company like yours, is media consolidation, where how much newspapers can own local television station. Does that come into your world at all?
You know, from a digital perspective, I mean, it is interesting to see how that may change the dynamics. And what's nice about the newspaper industry and the media business is people like to partner. And so if someone has a comparative advantage in information because of a local discipline or because of a vertical discipline like sports, we'll find ways of partnering and helping distribute that content. The best part about the web is that if the economics work out, people want to work with you. And that's why companies like Yahoo and Google and Microsoft and the rest have been successful. They built a great technology platform that redistributes information. They've done it in a way in which they could make it beneficial for them and for others and their partners. I think the same thing will happen. And you'll see a lot more newspaper companies, traditional media companies linking up so that they can protect their brands, but also protect their audience, but not be naive to the benefits of partnering with companies that may help them profitably. So I think it's actually it's a good time to be in this space today because people are talking about consolidation on one side, but also looking at distribution of this information, not by where the printing press is or where the zip code is, but by the user. And I think that's the most important part, focusing on that user.
Transferring to a whole other platform is a risk at best. How do you gauge success then in the end of all your efforts?
Well, I think the biggest success we'll be able to define is when we have a national advertiser who and a group of them who will come to us and look at Gannett as a leading figure, not just because of the information we produce, but the ease at which they could reach an audience that they need to market their message to. In the end, we produce content, but we monetize it by selling advertising against it, especially on the web. And the goal for us is to be able to do that profitably, but more importantly, be able to solve problems for the consumer and the advertiser. The content we're really good at producing.
Chris Saridakis serves as the Chief Digital Officer for the Gannett Company. Thanks for being on the Communicators.
Thank you.